For nearly half a century, the US has prohibited nearly all trade as well as travel to and from Cuba. But as you may remember, President Obama campaigned on a new strategy towards the island nation. And today, a major push by senators and interest groups began to pass potentially historic legislation which would end the travel ban, a ban which has already been relaxed, but only a bit. Our man in Havana, Michael Voss, reports on what that major shift could mean for Cuba.
An American charter plane lands at a special terminal at Havana Airport. Most of the passengers are Cuban Americans coming home to visit relatives. They come laden with cases of clothes, medicines, toys and other gifts. Under the Bush administration, these visits were limited to just once every 3 years. That restriction has now been lifted. It's a small step, but it is the first time in years that relations have started to ease.
I feel great because I got my family with me now, you know? That's awesome, all right?
And what's the feeling in the States at the moment? Obama, Cuba, do you think things are going to get better? What are you hoping for?
I think there's things going to get better, you know? Everybody's got a big hope with the new president. And yes, he's making a lot of changes for good, for us, the people, right?
The restrictions on family visits have been lifted, though the majority of Americans are still not allowed to travel here. But under the new political climate, it appears that an increasing number of people are thinking about breaking the rules. And a new book's just been published in the United States called The Definitive Guide to the Legal and Illegal Travel to Cuba. US citizens are allowed to use these flights and travel here legally, provided they have a special license from the Treasury Department. These are granted on religious or humanitarian grounds or for legalized food sales. In the past few months, this terminal has undergone a major expansion and refit in preparation for whatever changes lie ahead. About 2 million tourists visit Cuba each year, mainly from Canada and Europe. There's always been some Americans prepared to defy the travel ban. This cruise ship is based in the Bahamas. Under current US law, any vessel which sails to Cuba is not allowed to enter a US port for 6 months. It's one reason why this is the first cruise ship to dock here in almost a year. According to the Cuban authorities, US travel companies are in regular contact, all queuing up to come here if the travel ban is ever lifted.
They're crazy about coming here. Everyone, the airlines, the cruise liners, people, the American people.
These are early days, though, and it could all come to nothing. Cuba's president, Raul Castro, has pushed through some limited social and economic reforms, but this remains a one-party state with no opposition groups allowed. US Vice President Joe Biden said this week that Washington expects a firm commitment towards democracy and human rights before lifting the trade embargo. The European Union has formally ended all of its sanctions and renewed relations. This recent meeting in Havana brought the two sides together to work out how best to spend more than $40 million in EU development aid. The European Union believes that by engaging with Cuba and working together on areas such as trade, the environment and food security, then in the future this could open the door to further discussions on areas such as human rights. After almost half a century of hostilities, Cuban-American relations are entering uncharted waters. Many expect that changes will come step by step, such as further boosting agricultural sales. Food trade is allowed, but on a cash-only basis. It's a $750 million a year business that could grow substantially if credit sales are allowed. Michael Voss, BBC News, Havana.
Welcome back. The US Federal Reserve concluded a 2-day meeting today with a warning that America's economy is likely to remain weak for some time, and with a decision to leave interest rates at near historic lows. As the global economy remains in the doldrums, even nations that you might expect to be immune are feeling the pinch. Cuba's state-run economy is a good example, as the BBC's Michael Voss explains in tonight's Global Business Connection.
Havana in June, and it's starting to get hot and humid. Now Cubans are sweating under a series of new austerity measures. Shops and offices are leaving their doors and windows open, air conditions being rationed to just a few hours a day. There are also fewer buses on the roads. Cash-strapped Cuba can't afford to import more oil. The government's ordered everyone to reduce fuel and energy consumption. Blackouts are threatened if savings aren't made.
Until recently, most Cubans thought they'd escaped the worst of the world economic crisis. It was seen as a failure of capitalism that would have little impact on this state-run economy where most people have jobs for life. Now they've discovered that no one is immune.
Today, Cuba is facing a serious liquidity problem, forcing it to cut back on a whole range of imports, including food and electrical goods. Tourist revenues are down, and so is the price of nickel, its major export. With the US trade embargo, Cuba has no access to loans or credit from the IMF or World Bank.
I haven't seen any countries which are not affected. Cuba is no exception, but we do have social measures to protect the population. You won't hear anyone here saying that they're going to lose their job tomorrow.
Jobs may be safe, but with shortages in the shops and wages at just $20 a month, there is some frustration at the slow pace of economic reform. If we don't do something, allow businesses and more economic freedoms, things will only get worse, this man told me. They should let people sell things, have their own small businesses. It would give people more options, this pensioner said. When Raul Castro became president, he did encourage private farmers in a bid to boost production and reduce imports. The rest of the economy, though, remains firmly under state control. Now the global financial crisis could further slow the pace of change. Michael Voss, BBC News, Havana.
Another country trying to increase its economic fortunes these days is Cuba, and they're turning to a true beast of burden to do it. The humble ox is pulling more than its fair share of weight due to an energy-saving drive. The BBC's Michael Voss reports from Havana on why farming is staying very old school for now.
Cuban farmers first started swapping tractors for oxen after the collapse of the Soviet Union. This communist-run island got all its fuel from Russia and was suddenly forced to learn how to do without. Today, Cuba gets subsidized oil from Venezuela, and there had been hopes that farmers could soon get some mechanized help instead. But the global economic crisis has hit Cuba hard, and now there are calls for more oxen, not less, as part of a wider energy-saving austerity program. In a bid to cut costly food imports, Cuba's president, Raul Castro, has started giving away unproductive state-owned land to small private farmers. But he's also warned that they would have to make do without gas-guzzling machinery.
Like President Castro said in his speech, we have to make an offensive attack without oxen. We need to save. We are in a time when saving is necessary, and that's what we're doing. We're going on the offensive with the oxen.
There are currently more than 250,000 oxen working the fields of Cuba, and the authorities argue that on small farms at least, they are a match for most machines. Now, the longer the recession lasts, the more these beasts of burden will have to carry the load. Michael Voss, BBC News, Havana.
For decades, Fidel Castro blanketed Cuban airwaves with speeches that stretched for hours. When he fell ill 3 years ago, the speeches suddenly stopped and we lost sight of the leader. But now new pictures have been broadcast in Cuba showing the former president with a remarkably healthy spring in his step. The BBC's Michael Voss reports now from Havana.
Fidel Castro back from the brink. That's the message of this latest pre-recorded video. It's the first television pictures of Cuba's 83-year-old former president since June of last year. He appears fitter and healthier and is shown talking to a group of visiting Venezuelan students. At one point, he can be heard warning of the dangers of global warming. There have also been 2 sets of newspaper photographs, one of him meeting the president of Ecuador. Fidel is seen wearing a white shirt, normal street clothes, as opposed to the customary sports tracksuit top seen in almost all previous pictures. There was speculation that his health had deteriorated significantly at the end of last year in the run-up to the 50th anniversary of the revolution. These pictures suggest that Fidel Castro has visibly improved since then.
I think he looks good, given he is 83 years old. What we ask of God is to give him another 83 years, so he can continue his vision of the future, which is so valuable to us.
I'm very happy to see him so healthy, and God willing, he will last many more years.
Fidel Castro is one of the last remaining major players of the Cold War, leading the 1959 revolution which turned this Caribbean island into a communist state on America's doorstep. He ceded power to his younger brother Raul 3 years ago following major surgery and hasn't been seen in public since then.
So the first television pictures in a year, the first newspaper photographs in 6 months. But why now? It may simply be to reassure people that he's on the mend, or it could be setting the scene for a more active political role. Fidel Castro may have given up the presidency, but he remains head of the powerful Communist Party. A special meeting's been called for later this year to elect a new party leadership. And it's still not clear if Fidel Castro intends to continue in that role. Michael Voss, BBC News, Havana.